Hello and good day, relatives. I want to welcome everybody back to the New Tradition Podcast. My name is Jeremy.
And I'm Collins.
And today's episode is brought to you by OUN, a new Indigenous-led organization out of Standing Rock.
Thank you for that, Jeremy. So I wanted to first thank all of our listeners, all of our followers, all of the people that comment, share, and like everything that we have been putting out. It helps us tremendously, and we're so completely grateful for it. So in today's discussion, we want to talk about COVID-19 and the pandemic that we are still in. As you know, we are reaching the 1-year anniversary, and the pandemic has affected all of us in numerous of ways. Some of our families have been affected either financially, emotionally, mentally, and some have been affected in other ways. And we wanted to bring this discussion to this platform because it's important to talk about it. Important to talk about the positives and negatives, and also maybe share some tips with you all. So Jeremy, let's start with you. Something that we've come to realize is that this pandemic wasn't easy, and it's projected that it might be here for a while, and we've kind of had to start adapting to it and getting used to the idea that this is the quote-unquote new normal. So in your perspective and your experience in this past year, how has the pandemic affected you mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually?
It's been challenging on every level. Like you had stated, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary, and I remember back in the beginning of the pandemic, we had just put together as a company this My Sisters Are Warriors initiative, and we had a full schedule of traveling and working with all of our ambassadors in their respective communities, and scheduled trainings around the country surrounding that initiative. And literally a week after launching it, that's when the pandemic kind of hit full blown, and they started doing the the travel bans and lockdown and all of that stuff. And it was just kind of like, what in the world do we do with this now? And it's been definitely challenging trying to figure out how to adapt professionally in that kind of space, but not only in the context of just that initiative, but just as our company, we specialize in direct training within communities. Pre-pandemic, we were working directly with large groups of people, face-to-face, hands-on, with adults and youth, and a lot of creative projects and things, and all of that came to a halt. And I think as a company, and myself as the director, it was very alarming to think, what are we going to do? How are we going to adapt to this? Because within about less than a month's time, I watched a year's worth of contracts and income and operating costs just literally disappear. And thinking, how do I recuperate that so that we can continue forward? And I'll expand a little bit more about how that affected actually in a positive way. But as a father, it's been very stressful and challenging as well, because we do have children, and we have a newborn daughter. Well, she's not newborn now, she's almost 2.
Yes.
But a baby, and she definitely requires a lot of attention, and in normal spaces where it would be easy to go out and do just kind of daily functions, like going to get groceries, or even when it comes down to traveling, or when you are out and about doing certain things and you want to stop and get something to eat. Before we could just easily go in and do all of those kind of things, but we just scratched just basically all of that off of the list, because in order to keep her safe, we had to keep distanced, and just very cautious with her, just because she is so vulnerable and precious to us. But with our older daughters, at the same, it was something that we wanted them to be safe, because they had school to continue with. We have a daughter that's in college, and 2 more that are in high school.
And
so
some might have seen that as like a sacrifice, but I don't necessarily feel it's a sacrifice when you're just putting a necessity to the side for the love of your family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just that being said, it really caused us all to take into account what really matters, and we did have to make some, some concessions to be able to say, we know that we still need to continue to enjoy life and somehow figure out a way to function, and even in social situations. But what's the priority here? And that's the well-being of all of us, because even if one of us goes out of this house and chooses to just do whatever, we still have to come home, you know what I mean? And depending on who we're in the environment of or where we go, we could be walking back in the door, carrying the virus and not know it, so we definitely had to be cautious in that kind of space. But I think the most challenging part of it all has been on the mental and emotional side of trying to maintain and establish stability, because this pandemic, in every way that it's affected us, even on a social level, where we're not able to gather and do the things that we would normally do outside of home that bring us joy and relief and things like that, we had to find new ways to go about that, but trying to figure out how to maintain that balance of emotional stability and mental stability, because even here within our home, our relationships changed drastically because we were all kind of kept in a singular space, and all of our tendencies kind of came out in the open, and we've all individually and collectively have had to kind of come together time and again to address those and work through certain things. And it's been really interesting because it's brought out a lot of just like past trauma from all of us, things that we hadn't necessarily processed through yet. But I think it was good because we were able to do it in a healthy environment. And I think that we were fortunate that you and I have kind of gone through much of our own journey before all of this had happened, so that we had an understanding of what was going on and were able to kind of help facilitate that for our daughters. But it was challenging nonetheless, you know what I mean? And it's something that still continues today, because we are still in this space, and we have found, some ways to kind of manage the new normal, I guess. But at the same time, I feel like we're still trying to fit into that. I know that I am, because I professionally and just, I guess, all the way across the board, I had it in my mind that all of this was going to end in a short period of time, and I've kind of been waiting, well, maybe another couple of months, another couple of months, and here we are a year later. And like reading the different reports about the virus, they say that this is something that could possibly even just become like a seasonal sickness like the flu, that it could be that long standing. And that's scary to think, if every year we're going to have to be, looking at the potential of losing mass amounts of relatives because of just the severity of it and how it's mutating and things. And it's really bizarre that our world has changed that much, and everybody is feeling the weight of it, from the grief to the relationship stress to just everything,
What about, has it impacted you spiritually in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as human beings, we're whole beings, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and all of those things are intertwined, whether or not we pay attention to them or not. I think even in an everyday space, there are many of us that maybe don't have a connection spiritually, or don't really carry spirituality, I guess, so to speak. And I'm not talking about religion, but just a way of understanding your connection to the totality of things. A lot of us, some of us are just completely, stuck in our mentality. We're very logical people, and that's where we sit. Others of us are very emotional, and we can be very impulsive and respond and react in those ways. But nonetheless, a lot of the times when those things are out of balance, it's because we're not paying attention, to ourselves spiritually. So for me, it's definitely had an effect, because I think as a father and kind of a someone that everyone turns to in that kind of space, it's really brought a lot of focus in that way to me, and not only for our own family, but just extended relatives and people that have come and will ask us for help or prayer and things of that nature, and it's been really interesting even just to see that the way this pandemic has caused me to grow in that spiritual aspect of my life. I think it's something that has strengthened my faith, for one, and has brought me closer to Creator, and has helped me to understand how to help connect other people in that kind of space, But I think more than anything, on the larger scheme of things in this world that we're living in, the greatest way that it's affected me has just been in the way of genuine faith and prayer, and realizing, we're walking into something that we genuinely have no control over, and it's something that you can't necessarily see. And, one of the best things that you can do for the sake of everything that's happening, emotional stability, financial stability, and mental stability, and just all of these things, every way that you need to be well, like in an understanding that us as living beings in the totality of this creation, from the time that we were born and we gained voice, we have influence in this life, and we're vibratory beings in a space that right now, as I'm speaking, I'm causing vibrations out into the into creation, and even without word, thought does the same thing. Right. It has a frequency. So in all of those spaces, we're calling upon the universe and creation to bring things forward, and it's taught me to be discerning and aware of how that energy is being put out, being cautious about what I say or what I speak, or trying to be as mindful as possible of what I'm thinking, in a way that I'm making sure to try and bring good about, through my experience, or for my family, or whatever it might have been. But I guess another piece to add to that, though, has been the grief, that everybody has been feeling. And it's this pandemic has taken such a tremendous toll on our communities. We've lost so many elders and relatives, and it really is more than I can count on my two hands, and I can never recall a time in my life when I've lost so many relatives in the space of literally months, more than I can count on my two hands, and it's devastating, Right. I know that I feel the weight of it, and us as a family, we feel the weight of it, and not only our immediate relatives, but just the collective trauma that it's causing in all of our communities. It just seems like every week we see another relative and someone that's close to us, posting that, I lost my parents, or I lost my grandparents, or, and it's constant, what I mean? And you just, when you see it, you feel for them, what I mean? You can feel the weight of the grief, and I think in that space, that's something that has also kind of brought a heightened sense, I guess, in terms of spirituality, and that, like the best thing that, we can do for all of us is pray, and keep those people in mind, and their hearts and their spirits and things, and kind of pray strength into them, those kind of things. And I think that's what our people have always taught us, that there are going to come hard times and things, and always stick close to Creator, because that's truth, beyond any physical reality that we will ever be in. That is the ultimate truth, what I mean? That's what everything extends from, and I think it's something that's just really heightened my awareness in that. So, yeah.
Well, I know that, in this home, in the way that I've experienced the pandemic is slightly different from the way that you've experienced it. And the way that it's affected myself emotionally is the fact that we have 4 daughters. One of them lives with her dad, but nonetheless, we do have 4, and collectively holding us together emotionally as a family hasn't been easy, but it hasn't been difficult either. Yeah. I can say it's just
I think it creates like a really unique task for you as a mother, just carrying that kind of love, because it's different from me, you know what I mean? So it's, I don't know, like it's just kind of feels like, okay, not necessarily what do I need to fix, but what can I help our daughters understand? What kind of story can I tell them that's going to help them to see the situation from a different perspective and help them get to that next point of understanding? So I think in those ways that I feel like I've grown, I guess, in my storytelling skills, but also as an educator of some sorts of our own family of health and wellness. And that is really comforting to know. To realize that I can do this for our daughters, and I feel like as a result of that, like my communication skills, even with you, has gotten better.
as a wife, as a partner, so that we can see eye to eye. Maybe we're not always eye to eye, but I feel like for a majority of the part, we do try to meet each other on that same level. Mentally and emotionally, though, aside from our family, that grief part that you're talking about, that part really hits me like a ton of bricks. And not just for myself, but I think for our family. And like you had talked about, it's every single day, on at least on my timeline, on my social media, it's a high amount of relatives that we're losing every single day. And it's so sad. And you know how close it is to hear, like, baby and I just went for a walk the other day, and the lady whose house where we always see like the fun flowers outside and the tree that has a face on it or whatever, when we were walking by, she had reached out to us, of course, from a safe distance. She was on a porch and we were on the sidewalk, and she was just talking to baby and I, and had let us know that her sister that we've seen out there with her before had passed away due to COVID.
Yeah.
And she was to the point of tears, and just kind of ready to move on to that next part of her life. But she was so sad about it because her and her sister lived there for 20 plus years. Yeah. And knowing that even though we don't directly know these people, the impact of sadness is still there.
Yeah.
And from human to human, you still grieve with them. You still want to help them and hug them and let them know it's going to be okay. Yeah. And I think on a bigger scale, this pandemic is, I hope opening people's eyes and hearts that we're all in this life right now together. And the only separation that we put between us and helping one another is our own thoughts and ideas that we have about each other and the color of our skin. At least what we've been experiencing recently.
Yeah. And
so anyway, I feel like in the way this pandemic has affected me spiritually, I'm on the same with you. The way you said that, you stay close to Creator, I feel the same way. I feel myself praying constantly throughout the day, even if it's just a quick prayer, either for whomever it may be, even a person like a friend, that had popped into my mind. And I truly feel that if they came into your mind, that you need to say a prayer for them, because we don't know where they're at on their path. So I feel in these ways, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, this is how the pandemic has impacted me. But we know that if we're feeling this way, our communities are certainly feeling the weight of all of this too. I know that there's both positive and negatives when it comes to the pandemic affecting our communities, and that's one of them, losing a lot of our relatives. But some of the other things that I do see slowly starting to turn is we're coming back to our roots. We're really diving in and searching for that knowledge that we're accessible to. We're reaching out for stories, and we're making it public to our Indigenous peoples who will listen.
Yeah, it makes me think of the recent conversation we had with Lexi Redboy and Dewey Natalie, that he had expressed how for a lot of us it's been a struggle because of the ceremonies that we're so used to that kind of revitalize us year in and year out. This past year they didn't happen. You know what I mean? And to a lot of people from the outside, they would think, oh, so what? You know what I mean? But for those of us that are present to those kinds of things and really are affected by it, like where that's where our spirituality exists, and that's part of our connection to Creator, and the space that we look for restoration, for that to be absent is tremendous. Because like a lot of us, we work throughout our year, and that is kind of like our time of renewal, where we kind of get built back up, energetically speaking. And but it was interesting because he was saying, I guess in relation to that there are a lot of people that, have passed that are carrying knowledge of those things, and people that we always looked to always be there to take care of it. But a lot of us are realizing that we're becoming those people now, that we can't look to anybody else to take care of it. That I know that even us, we've had this conversation multiple times that, all of the aunties and uncles and grandparents and parents that we thought were always going to be there to kind of guide us and lead us, like they're getting up in age, and we're kind of waking up and realizing and finding ourselves in the spaces that it's time now, like the responsibility is kind of passed. And seeing that a lot in community as well, and it's a big transition that is happening right here and now. And I think even just that in itself is something that weighs on people, because I know that even in my own space of realizing certain things that have been handed over, it's intimidating, because you always have looked to other people to take care of it, in the past. And then when you come into the space where they kind of step out of the way and they say, there you go ahead. Now, you've watched me long enough, now is your time. And, like all of a sudden you're kind of on the main stage with Creator, and it's like, do I even deserve to be here? Because I don't feel like I've been alive long enough, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, with that being said, I want to encourage our relatives out there in the communities and our young people, pay attention and take advantage of what's being shown and opportunities there to be able to learn, because your community needs you, especially during this time when we have so many elders that are passing away and taking knowledge with them. You know what I mean? It's imperative that we do our best to try and preserve those kinds of things so that our spirituality, continues forward. But at the same time too, I feel like as that transition takes place, there are some new things that need to come into place through us. You know what I mean? And it's just a really interesting thing to see the way that community is changing in that light, and I think that it's for the better. There's a blessing in it, even though there's a lot of grief that's coming along with it, because one of the things that kind of continues to come up in these conversations and dialogues that we have with people is that there are so many people like in our generation and younger that are coming to the table with an entirely different mindset of actively seeking healing. They're really doing the work to try and repair what our identity looks like, what our culture actually means, when we've spent so many years and decades and generations going through motions just because. People are really getting to the root of why. What does it really mean? And rather than always feeling the need to show up, decked out in buckskin and feathers or something like that, we're showing up just as we are, and our culture is being embodied internally through an understanding of what it means to be a good relative, showing up with sincere values, sincere compassion and humanity and humility and things of that nature, And I say that confidently because we're seeing it happen in community, that and to kind of bring up Tui Natalie and all of her network of people here in the local area that have been doing the local community aid and relief, like that's a perfect example of it, and other people around the country that have been doing those things. Because when this pandemic came about, it was interesting to see what happened in dominant society, how there was this mad scramble of panic, and everybody took off because this respiratory virus and bought up all the toilet paper. You know what I mean? And it was like watching from an outside, you're just kind of looking with the side eye like,
why?
Did you not get the right memo?
I know.
I don't think your butt is the issue.
Yeah.
But, like it was interesting though, because in contrast, in our native communities, there was no hesitation for people to begin coming together and helping one another. You know what I mean? Because that's what we've always done, and it's like that age-old spirit of resiliency that just is inherent within us, you know what I mean? And there were young kids and adults that began to stand up and say, well, what about the kids? They have these needs and all of these things we need to make sure that they're taken care of. And kids were saying, well, what about the elders?
Right.
They need to be protected. They need food. They need toilet paper. You know what I mean? And it was interesting to see how just that spirit just kind of came alive in all of our, our tribal nations and communities, And I think it it helped us to kind of become more accountable to what community actually means. You know what I mean? Because I think for a long time we've thrown that word around, but we've not really embodied it. You know, we haven't really done adequate work to genuinely take care of one another, you know. But I feel like during this time, and it's not perfect, you know what I mean? But I feel like it definitely has changed a lot of our communities for the better, and it showed us what we're capable of. You know, in spaces where prior to this, maybe, you know, collectively we all just kind of looked at tribal council and tribal government to say, well, how are you going to handle it and what are you going to do? But it came to a point that, you know, they had their own way of addressing it, but there were people and individuals within our communities who said, we can't wait for you.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Right.
And I'll figure out a way to do it on my own, you know? And in that space, we saw the community rise up and kind of transcend those red tape limitations and just make it happen. You know what I mean? And that was a really beautiful thing to see. And I hope that we've learned from that collectively, because it shows the kind of self-reliance we're capable of, you know, and the kind of growth that we're capable of maintaining and creating, moving forward in a way that can actually, you know, empower our communities to really flourish and prosper and thrive, you know?
I guess, like, in a bigger sense, it kind of reminds me of that saying of hitting rock bottom, and not necessarily that it is a rock bottom, but I feel like it gave us that push that we all needed to say, you all need to step up now, because the way everything's going right now isn't working. So things need to shift and things need to change. And because the pandemic had kept everybody in close quarters, and I guess paying attention to, like, the computer screen or whatever may be on social media, it really caused everybody to be at a standstill where they were paying attention and where they had the accessibility and the understanding now of plants, traditional medicines, traditional food, languages, stories, how to make stuff, you know. And it was really, or not was, but is really making everybody think bigger, smarter, and industrious. I know that in our own family, we do a lot of DIYs and just try to figure things out on our own, because we're capable of that. You know, we're no longer waiting for, like you said, somebody else to provide something for us. We're, you know, us and our daughters are taking matters into our own hands and trying to make a way the best way that we can. So regarding that, like, the way this pandemic has affected our family and kept us in close quarters, I know that it's been difficult in some ways, but also very beautiful. I guess it would be considered that saying, you know, where we were all seeds planted in the dirt, and I feel like maybe Bug was the sunshine, like, uprooting all of us to bring us to where we are now. Because the way that it has paid off, I mean, our baby, she hugs one of us, but she brings us all in. Like, she literally calls all of us in to hug one another multiple times a day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's beautiful.
It is, because I think, you know, before that, it wasn't a thought that was in our mind, because, you know, I guess it's just the normality that you just kind of hug one person, you know. But in her mind, it's like, this feels good and you all need to feel good. You know what I mean? And it's a really beautiful thing, because I don't think we would think to necessarily do that. I mean, we have, you know, a couple of times, but not on the level that she does. You know what I mean? But I definitely agree. You know, she's something that has kind of been the glue since we all came together, you know, and she's taught us a lot about love and family. You know what I mean? Where we all kind of came from our own respective spaces and came to the table with our own issues and things, which is understandable, you know what I mean? But in the midst of all of that going around, like, she just kind of, like, just walked into the middle of it all. And when she does, like, all of that kind of pushes back a little bit, and then we're just kind of left there with the love that's there that we all have for her. And that's kind of the common meeting ground. And we realize, like, in that space, that's really where we are family, is when that love connects. And it's really beautiful, you know?
Well, it's funny too, because her name is Love. In English language. But with her being, like, the sunshine of it all, I don't think in those darker parts we realize that. Not saying that we put all of our growth within her hands, you know, but there was a point, because we've all been so close together. Like, our home isn't huge, but it's not super tiny either. We're kind of in the middle a little bit. And because we've had to stay in close quarters for this entire year, it's really caused us to reflect one another. And it's really brought out a lot of traumas, I think, that we didn't know were sitting there, or maybe that we pushed to the far back because we didn't want to remember. And to be honest, nobody wants to remember trauma.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to remember the feelings associated with it because it's not good. You know, why would you want to travel back to somewhere where you don't feel good? But if we don't, it's going to continue on.
Yeah.
And we're going to keep reacting to one another in the same ways. And I think that when we were in close quarters, and I had said this before, maybe it was earlier, that we all became one another's mirror. And when we seen what we truly look like in those moments, when maybe we were acting out of trauma, it didn't look the prettiest. You know, it wasn't like super ugly either. It was just like an experience. But then we try to go another way, but it's still sitting there. And then finally, we're like, oh, we got to deal with this.
Yeah.
And that was hard because there were a lot of tears, like so many tears on my behalf, your behalf, the girls. And it was just like one big tear fest, you know, but it was needed. And there's power in that because you know that at the root of madness and frustration is sadness. And in order for us to grow, we needed to go through the rain. And that was so incredibly important for us as a family. And I guess using all these beautiful words makes it sound like one big, beautiful experience. And it can be, but it's rough.
Yeah.
At the same time. But in the ways that I see that it's impacted our daughters, because we all stayed so close together, and even us as parents and together and individually, has really been amazing. You know, everybody's kind of turned into their own versions of the flowers that they want to be, and that's powerful and that's beautiful. And in that journey and in this space and time, especially during this pandemic, to encourage everybody, take the leap. You know, what are you waiting for? Yeah. You want a good life and you want to feel good, take the leap.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, it seems like we all had to learn to be human. You know, I think we all came from spaces that dehumanized us, you know what I mean? Right. Or even, I think collectively speaking, just in dominant society, it's that way. You know, like you're encouraged to always be an embodiment of strength and perfection, and, you know, nothing gets me down or whatever, but that's foolish. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like each and every one of us are human, and it doesn't matter how strong you look on the outside or what you try to exemplify. Pain is coming to get you no matter what, you know, like you're not immune to it. And to sit there and to try and put on like nothing affects you, it really is foolish, you know, because at the end of the day, you're not really fooling anybody but yourself. You know, you're not, and at the end of the day, you're hurting yourself. You know what I mean? You know, there's this phrase that comes to mind of what you don't, you know, allow to flow through you, you begin to embody. And all of these emotional experiences that you go through, if you don't allow yourself to feel them and acknowledge that they happen, they don't flow through your experience. They get caught up, you know, and you just kind of become like a big mass of pain, basically, you know, and that's what drives your decisions, your relationships, your pursuits in life, everything. And then that's when all of the challenge and the hardships come, because you're engaging life out of pain and fear. You know what I mean? Like you're making those kind of decisions, and there can only be negative consequences in that. You know what I mean? So it's important that you allow yourself to feel and process those things and acknowledge that you are human. You know, to be able to say, you know what, I fell down, I stumbled, and it hurt. You know, or this is what I went through, and it really broke my heart. You know, it really brought sadness upon me. And it's important to be able to communicate those things, you know what I mean? So that you can have that release. And sometimes that's all it takes, is just to be able to vocalize it to another person, because it could be something that you've been carrying for 20 years that you've never told anybody. And then just a few minutes time of being able to say, you know what, can I tell you something in confidence, you know? And this is what I went through. What do you think about this? You know, at the end of that maybe 5-minute conversation, you feel relieved, and that no longer is carrying the weight that it did before, and you've allowed it to finally flow. You know what I mean? So a lot of us are kind of, walking around like these gigantic reservoirs of hardship and emotional turmoil, when ideally we're supposed to be functioning like a river, like, just acknowledge that it happened and process it through so that you can move on to something else. You know what I mean? But I think in terms of our family, that's one of the things that we've learned to do effectively, and I think we have to owe a lot of that to you in terms of helping us to be able to acknowledge it. You know what I mean? And kind of like making that call to say, hey, slow down, come back. And let's address this. Let's talk about it. What is it? Because it's really easy to fall into those old habits of just no, I'm okay. I'm okay. Nothing. And we see that time and again with all of us, with our daughters, and even with us, but there does come a point where one of us has to kind of step forward and say, wait, come back. And I think that, just during this time of this pandemic and being in such a common space, we've grown in that way of being able to do that, and in the beginning it was an incredibly painful process, because all of us had come from that place of just embodying pain, you know what I mean, and not really knowing how to communicate it, or we had certain ways of coping or avoiding or running or escaping, you know what I mean. But I think it's created a healthy accountability to all of us, and coming back around to spirituality, that's one of the ways that we've chosen to handle it here in our home. We do make time to have those important conversations and help one another process through all of these things. And then once that clarity is, comes back around, that we sit down and we bring it to ceremony. We pray our way through it and put it away, and then we pray forward, in terms of how things are going to be. And I'm really thankful for that, because it's really created a powerful approach to really genuinely being able to heal those things and create good things moving forward. And I'm thankful that our daughters have come to understand that and have seen it work and come to fruition, that they know, and that this has kind of become a way of life for all of us. You know what I mean? And although everything isn't perfect and never will be, I think it's definitely helped us to come to a healthier space and a more stable place. I think another thing that comes to mind is when I was younger, when it came to like spirituality and moving forward, I would be very particular in terms of what I wanted, of how I wanted things to be. And I'm not saying that it's bad to be clear about those things, but one thing that I've learned here and now in my adulthood is that my main goal and intent in all of these things when I pray is just stability. You know what I mean? Like, because so many times we want things so particularly in our lives, but oftentimes stability isn't even in the picture. You know what I mean? But ultimately that really is what we're looking for, is that day when things can be good, or a space when everything can be stable without all of the hardship and the turmoil and all of those kind of things. But being able to say, in a simplest prayer, Creator, I'm thankful for my life. Guide me to where stability is today, whatever that looks like. Like I kind of offer that up to you. Show me what it looks like. Like, to me, that's the one thing that really shows the clear path, because otherwise it's really easy to be walking ahead in that space and then look off to the side. Oh, that's nice. Take me over there, and then you're no longer on the path that you were supposed to be on, Yeah. And I think a lot of times we do that to ourselves unknowingly, but I guess just being able to be clear about, just that bigger picture motive. What are you really looking for? What are you after? And I think in the context of this conversation, ultimately that is the goal. That's what everybody's looking for, is this big collective trauma monster of this virus hit the entire globe. You know what I mean? Like that really is what was shaken up on so many levels, financially, emotionally, spiritually, physically. Like everybody was kind of shaken out of whatever stability it was that they had, and it's kind of like being in an earthquake, and everybody's kind of looking for something to stabilize himself, and where is the solid ground to stand upon, and how do I recover from all of these things, and being able to be clear about it, that really is what we're after, is stability. And even without this pandemic, I kind of feel like maybe that's kind of like one of the blessings in disguise, is that it kind of shook us out of our collective neurosis and said, what really matters on every level, what really matters to you, you know.
Right.
And here we are, you know, hopefully going through our learning processes and coming to something better, you know. But I think that's one of the ways that it's really affected our family in a positive way, is that it's brought that kind of holistic stability to us,
Yeah.
you know, in every way. So
I do agree that it's like a constant effort, and that it won't ever be perfect, but nothing in life really is perfect. And I think that once we come to realization that that's not the goal, it's just to be well, feel well, do well. One of my favorite quotes by Anthony Hamilton is, pray hard, walk tall, do right.
yeah.
And that's one of his songs too.
Yeah.
And it just, I love it. It's so simple, but it just says so much. And I'm like, yes, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So along with this, I know that because of our experience and all the work that we've been doing together as a family, what are some tips that we can provide for others on communicating their wants or needs, or where they're at emotionally or mentally during this pandemic, either with a partner, a friend, or even in a workspace, you know, advocating for oneself?
Well, I guess first and foremost is understanding that communication is key, you know, and I think that's just on every level. If you want wellness or stability in life, it's going to require some effective communication. And that doesn't mean just getting the point across of what you want, but I think it starts even within you, in terms of being honest with yourself, learning to genuinely communicate sincerely with yourself, and being able to ask those questions of what do I need, you know, so that you can very clearly state those things. Because I think too many times we're in the space of want, you know, what do I want? What do I want? What do I want? And that's the reason why we never get what we need.
Yeah,
You know, why we never find the stability is because we're chasing life by impulse. You know what I mean? But I think being able to, you know, pose some very, I guess, poignant questions to yourself in terms of clarifying where it is that you're really trying to go and what are you trying to achieve, you know, like, you know, answering that question about stability. What does that look like for you? And what do you need in order to establish that, you know, because we all have different needs.
Can I add something to this real quick? Is that, yes, communication is key. And once you find out what those tips are, or those poignant points are, something that you're really going to have to take a deep look at too is, am I matching my words? So am I walking in the direction of what I'm saying, of what I really want? Because if I'm saying I want this, but I'm continuing with my actions that I've always done in this way and getting the same result, you're not meeting your words halfway.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, it's definitely something that you have to be accountable to. You know, once you kind of put your order in for what it is, you got to go get it. You know what I mean? And I always kind of like share that with people, you know, in terms of prayer when they come around and ask for help, even spiritually speaking, is that, you know, you can be as clear as you want in your words, you know, but once it happens, like when you stand up from where you're sitting, you have to start walking it out immediately. Right. You know what I mean? And don't forget your prayers. Keep walking in the direction of it. Stay in alignment with it. You know what I mean? Versus just praying and crying about it and expecting it to show up with the ribbon around it. Yep. You know what I mean? But I think, you know, in the space of being genuinely honest with yourself, there's a question that I often pose to people in training environments. And because there are so many people that come looking for guidance and looking for help and looking for insight and things that are going to improve their life or help them develop themselves to a better space. And oftentimes they don't approach in a sincere manner. You know, they're looking for things that will make it easy for them. You know, a lot of people are looking kind of like for an easy way out, or what's your 10-point checklist, or what's the cure-all pill, you know, that's going to fix this. But the question I always pose to people before really diving into the meat of the training information is how honest are you really willing to be with yourself in order to be well. Before we go anywhere, before we discuss anything, I want you to answer that not to me, but to yourself, because it doesn't matter what I think. I can still convey all of this information, but the way that you answer what it is that this question is posing is going to determine what you're going to walk away with. You know what I mean? In every kind of space, a lot of people have never really taken that question into consideration because they're so concerned with portraying something outwardly to other people or to try and convince everybody else that they're well. Like a lot of it is they pursue what they pursue for the sake of show, to impress other people, when in reality it's like that's not wellness, and that's the reason why you're struggling in the first place. Come back over here and answer this question, and what does that really look like for you, so that you can actually understand what it is that you really need. Like, are you ready to receive when what it is that I'm going to say might strike a nerve? You know what I mean? Are you really going to be willing to sit there with the honesty of it and say, you know what, that struck a nerve because there's a lot of truth in it for me?
Right.
Or are you the person that's going to get offended because it struck a nerve and say, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about, just because you're trying to protect yourself, but that's a key point in terms of communication, because we have to be able to communicate honestly and openly about where it is that we are, and it starts with yourself, so that you can know, like, in a time comes when you're able to sit with someone and create a safe space. That's your opportunity to open up, you know what I mean, and establish a relationship, or to have that person genuinely help you along, you know what I mean? And I think one of the most effective ways that I've found in terms of communicating in that kind of space is allowing yourself to be vulnerable. You know what I mean? And a lot of times we're cautious because we're worried about what people will think of us. But 90% of the time, what I've found is that anytime that I've chosen to open up that vulnerability, I haven't been judged, so to speak. And it's opened up a way for my counterpart, whoever that was, to do the same. You know what I mean? And what I find out is that we have an ability to relate on those topics, because everybody goes through hardship, but very few of us really do find the opportunity just naturally to be able to open up about those things and find help. But just an example of a simple conversation would be like me coming to you and saying, do you have a moment? And being able to say, there's something that's been on my mind, and this is an experience that I've gone through. I'd like to share it with you, and I would like to kind of get your honest opinion on it. What's your perspective, And in that kind of conversation, that's one of the most powerful ways that you can kind of help yourself and other people process through things, because so many times we carry those experiences from our own perspective of being hurt, of being offended, or being ashamed, just because that was our direct experience. But sometimes being able to hand it to someone else and say, can you take a look at this and tell me what you see, and them coming from an outside perspective, they have an ability to see things without the emotional attachment to it, and they can show you certain things about it where actually maybe it had nothing to do with you, but you just kind of took offense to certain things, or whatever the case might be. But that external perspective has an ability to help you process through things, you know what I mean, and kind of bounce back and forth the feedback about what it is, So that's something that you can do even within your family, and I know that even times when we've tried to initiate conversations even with our daughters and things, and just kind of being able to ask the question in reverse, either that or even in training environments, one of the things that we use oftentimes is just objective conversation. So what I mean by that is, rather than me coming directly to you and saying, tell me about your life and tell me what's wrong, tell me what you did, and starting to pick your life particularly individually, what we do is kind of use a like a storytelling model and say, this is what the situation looks like, and we kind of create an objective model that's not necessarily attached to either one of us, but it's something that the both of us can relate to, you know what I mean? And in that, it creates a safe space for you to kind of just be able to process your own understanding of it, and apply it to your own experiences in a way that it opens up the door for you to be able to then come directly to me and say, actually, this was my experience, and this is where I used to understand it, but now reconsidering, this is what I feel about it. You know what I mean? So there's different ways in terms of that communication to be able to open up those lines to kind of create those healing dialogues and have those difficult conversations and a reality that they don't really have to be that difficult.
Right.
I think 9 times out of 10, it's just our fear that stands in the way, in the way of it, because I can't count how many times that I've had these kind of conversations, and at the end, the other person was like, I'm so glad you said that because this is what was bothering me too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was just afraid to say something, kind of thing. And that's true for most of us, because we are human and we all go through the same things,
I think just to add on to that, everything that you just said is consistency. Like once you start opening those doors of communication and you want to talk about whatever it may be with your families, whether it's trauma, healing, how you move forward as a family, whatever it may be, that consistency is key. Like it just doesn't take one time. Like for us, it's taken, I don't want to say every day, but every other day or every few days, and it's not like hours at a time of a conversation, but going back and readdressing something, because in the way that another reacted is all too familiar with the way that they reacted over here. Yeah. And that's the reason why we sat down. So let's bring it back to the table, like what's going on, and just giving that time and space. And I do understand that it can get tiresome and you're just, I just want to be okay now, can't we just have fun or, and that's so true. Yes, let's have fun. But we do have to still take care of this, even if we go do something else. Yeah. And that's the bigger part. And we also have to remember that as Indigenous peoples, that we're just not unpacking a couple years of hard things that we've gone through. Yeah. We're unpacking like 500 plus years of trauma that we've gone through without realizing how it trickled down to us now and today. Yeah. And once we realize that, then it's like, whoa, this is such a bigger responsibility than I realized. But I just want to encourage everybody not to give up, because once you get into that consistent mode of just working together and getting through it together, you start seeing the benefits of it. Yeah. And because we're in a small space, we don't have anywhere to go. Yeah. And it's like, because we have nowhere to go, and I guess the only distraction we have is the TV or social media or something, everything that we're sitting with is right here in this space and in this time. And if it's not going anywhere, then we need to deal with it.
Yeah. And I think it's always for the better, because there have been times when those things haven't been dealt with immediately, and we watched it just kind of like drag everybody down over the course of 3 or 4 days to where it comes to like a boiling point, and we have no choice but to address it. Right. You know what I mean? But once it does, then it's there's kind of a sigh of relief. So we've kind of learned to, even though it might not be the most comfortable thing, sit down, take the time and address it so that we can get back on track, and that everyone can be okay.
This just now came to thought, on Spirited Away, the movie. Remember there's that spirit that comes in and he's carrying so much junk and garbage with him, and everybody just doesn't want to work with him because it stinks. Yeah. That's kind of like what this whole scenario is. Yeah, and then it took one little girl to pull out just one thing, and then everything came out. Yeah. And then afterwards, like almost immediately, the spirit was just like, and super happy. Yeah. Because it got rid of all the garbage and trash.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. I'm glad we had this conversation.
So I think with that being said, that brings us to like a good point to kind of wrap up this conversation. And I really hope that everybody, got something good out of it. If you did, please, don't be afraid to reach out to us and kind of let us know what you thought. We really enjoy hearing feedback. At the same time, I know that this conversation, touched on some heavy topics. And with that being said, I want everybody to know that we do have resources available on our website, www.thriveunlimited.com, thriveunltd.com. If you click to the wellness directory, we have a list of different service providers, whether they be therapists, counselors, support groups, different types of ways to maintain internal wellness, and many of them have remote options. So there's some resources there that can help you along. Also, if you happen to be someone that has an ability to provide resources, or maybe you've made use of another resource that you feel like would be beneficial, please, there's a space to contact on the bottom of that page. Let us know who that is so that we can get in contact with them and see if they're available to be listed there. That directory is comprised of all indigenous practitioners. So that's what we're looking for is kind of culturally based and culturally relevant and coherent servicing for our people. We don't want to necessarily direct them out to something that's not going to understand them. So those resources are there. Please, by all means, take advantage of them. And the point of this conversation is to kind of open up that space to say, you're human, and by all means, take care of yourself. You're important. There are things and responsibilities that you need to do and to keep up with, but don't forget your heart. Don't forget your spirit. You're important in that, not only to yourself, but to your family and to the entirety of creation. You have a necessary place here. So.
If you like what you heard here today, please comment, like, share, follow us. Let us know your feedback. We love to hear from you. Generally, these conversations are based around our own experience, and we just want to share that experience with all of you to help you get through this journey called life. Please follow us on all social media platforms. Well, not all. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, but all podcast platforms, I want to say, and that's Apple, Spotify, et cetera, et cetera. And that's Thrive UNLTD across the board.
Absolutely. So this week's episode was brought to you by OUN, a new indigenous-led organization out of Standing Rock. We really hope that you got something good out of this episode. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Nawahiri.
Doksha ake.